After careful consideration, the board has unanimously decided to appoint Rebecca as the new Chief Executive Officer of Harrington Hotels, my father announced, his voice carrying the practiced authority of a man who'd spent 40 years building a hospitality empire. I sat motionless at the gleaming mahogany boardroom table, maintaining the composed expression I'd perfected through years of high-stakes negotiations. Across from me, my younger sister's face registered momentary shock before settling into a measured smile. The 7 board members, longtime family friends and business associates, nodded in approval. None would meet my eyes directly. Just 3 months earlier, I had orchestrated the financial restructuring that pulled our family's hotel chain back from the brink of bankruptcy, refinancing $87 million in debt, negotiating with creditors when liquidation seemed inevitable, and implementing operational changes that returned us to profitability for the first time in 9 quarters. Now, as reward for saving the company my grandfather had founded, I was being passed over for leadership in favor of my sister, whose primary contribution had been managing our smallest property in Vermont while pursuing her MBA part-time. "Michael will continue as Chief Operating Officer, of course," my father added, almost as an afterthought. "His operational expertise remains invaluable." The subtext was clear. I was the reliable workhorse, not the thoroughbred. The board meeting concluded with discussions of transition plans and press releases announcing Rebecca's historic appointment as the first female CEO in the company's 72-year history. I offered my congratulations with a handshake that betrayed nothing of my thoughts. It was only after returning to my office that I allowed myself a moment of raw emotion, not from jealousy, but from the crystalline certainty that they had made a catastrophic mistake. What none of them knew, not my father, not the board, and certainly not my sister, was that I had received a call that morning from Marcus Eastwood, CEO of Pinnacle Hospitality Group and our largest competitor. After months of confidential discussions, he was prepared to make a formal acquisition offer that would value Harrington Hotels at $415 million, more than triple our current market valuation. I had planned to present this opportunity at today's board meeting. Now, watching Rebecca being photographed with my father for the press release, I made a different decision. I picked up my phone and dialed Marcus's private number. "The situation has changed," I said when he answered. "I'd like to discuss an alternative arrangement. My name is Michael Harrington, 38 years old, third-generation hospitality executive, and, until that pivotal board meeting, the presumptive next leader of Harrington Hotels. I've spent my entire adult life preparing for this responsibility, starting as a front desk clerk during college summers, then methodically working through every department: housekeeping, food and beverage, sales, finance. After earning my MBA from Cornell's Hotel School, I declined lucrative offers from larger chains to join the family business, committed to preserving and expanding my grandfather's legacy. Harrington Hotels had been founded in 1951 by my grandfather, William Harrington, with a single property in Newport, Rhode Island. Through disciplined growth and a commitment to understated luxury, he expanded to 12 properties along the eastern seaboard by the time he handed leadership to my father in 1988. Under my father's direction, the company grew to 24 hotels across the United States, positioning itself as a premium alternative to larger chains, upscale enough for business travelers, but warm enough for family vacations. I joined the company officially in 2008, just as the financial crisis was devastating the hospitality industry. While many competitors retrenched or sold assets, I convinced my father to make strategic acquisitions of distressed properties, modernize our reservation systems, and reorganize our management structure. These initiatives positioned us well for the post-recession recovery, with revenues increasing 27% between 2010 and 2015, while maintaining our commitment to personalized service. My sister Rebecca's path had been different. 2 years younger than me, she had initially shown little interest in the family business. After majoring in art history at Vassar, She spent several years working for cultural institutions in New York and Boston before deciding, at 32, to join Harrington Hotels. My father placed her in charge of our smallest Vermont property, where she admittedly did well, increasing occupancy and implementing popular local art installations that generated positive press. 3 years ago, she began pursuing her MBA at night while continuing to manage the Vermont hotel. Our relationship had always been cordial but distant. Growing up, Rebecca had been our mother's focus. Artistic, expressive, encouraged to explore her interests freely. I had been my father's project, taught business principles over breakfast, brought to hotel openings instead of little league games, groomed relentlessly for succession. Neither of us had entirely chosen our paths. They had been subtly predetermined by our parents' own dynamics and expectations. The crisis that ultimately revealed these long-established patterns began 18 months ago when our director of finance discovered accounting irregularities that pointed to deeper problems. An external audit revealed that our CFO had been concealing declining performance through increasingly creative accounting practices. The truth was sobering. Harrington Hotels was significantly over-leveraged, with several properties underperforming and debt covenants in danger of being breached. When the CFO resigned in disgrace, I stepped into the financial leadership role alongside my operational responsibilities. What I discovered was worse than initially reported. We were effectively insolvent, with insufficient cash flow to meet our obligations beyond 6 months. The company my grandfather had built, and my father had expanded, was facing extinction. Immediately implemented emergency measures, freezing executive compensation, including my own, renegotiating vendor contracts, implementing energy efficiency initiatives that reduced utilities by 22%, and restructuring our management teams. Every morning began at 5 a.m. with a review of performance metrics. Every evening ended with calls to our general managers across time zones. I lived on planes, visiting each property to identify inefficiencies and opportunities, engaging directly with staff to build buy-in for difficult changes. My father, approaching 70 and increasingly removed from day-to-day operations, seemed paralyzed by the situation. Board meetings became tense affairs where I presented both problems and potential solutions, while he sat silently at the head of the table, the weight of potential failure visibly aging him. Rebecca remained in Vermont, concerned but distant, from the corporate crisis. The turning point came 9 months ago when I secured a meeting with Clayton Financial Partners, a private equity firm specializing in hospitality investments. After 5 hours of intensive questioning about our strategy and projections, they agreed to inject $50 million in exchange for a 30% stake, with specific performance benchmarks that would determine whether their ownership would increase or decrease over time. With this new capital, I restructured our debt, negotiated with lenders from a position of improved strength, and accelerated the operational changes already underway. Within 6 months, our EBITDA had improved by 31%. Occupancy rates were climbing across all properties, and we had successfully renegotiated our debt covenants to provide breathing room for continued recovery. Throughout this period, I had also been engaged in quiet discussions with Marcus Eastwood at Pinnacle Hospitality Group. Initially approached as a potential white knight investor, Marcus had gradually shifted toward discussing acquisition. While I had reservations about selling the family business, I recognized that Pinnacle's resources and market position could potentially preserve the Harrington legacy better than continued independent operation in an increasingly consolidated industry. By the time the board meeting was called to formalize the next generation of leadership, I had not only saved Harrington Hotels from bankruptcy, but positioned it for potential acquisition at a premium valuation, an outcome that would handsomely reward our shareholders, primarily family members, while ensuring the hotels themselves would continue operating under the Harrington name as part of Pinnacle's collection of distinctive properties. The decision to appoint Rebecca as CEO blindsided me completely. While she had demonstrated competence managing a single small property, she had no experience with corporate-level strategy, financial restructuring, or managing a portfolio of diverse properties across multiple markets. More importantly, she had been entirely absent during the existential crisis we had just navigated. As the boardroom emptied following the announcement, my father approached, placing a hand on my shoulder. "She needs a chance to lead, Michael," he said quietly. "You've always had the business instinct, but Rebecca has the vision thing. Like your grandfather. The numbers guy and the visionary. Together you'll make a perfect team." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. What he couldn't see, or refused to acknowledge, was that his supposedly balanced decision was fundamentally imbalanced. I had earned the position through demonstrated leadership during crisis. Rebecca was receiving it through nepotism thinly disguised as visionary potential. Back in my office, I closed the door and considered my options methodically. Resignation was the emotional response. Walk away perhaps to a competitor, and let them face the consequences of their decision. But that would mean abandoning the company I'd spent my life preparing to lead, the employees who had worked alongside me through the crisis, and ultimately, my grandfather's legacy. Creating conflict by challenging the board's decision would likely prove counterproductive, damaging both the company and family relationships without changing the outcome. The board had been unanimous, suggesting my father had secured their support before the meeting. The most strategic path forward required understanding the board's actual reasoning beyond my father's platitudes about vision. I spent the next 3 days in careful information gathering, individual calls with board members framed as discussions about supporting the transition, conversations with key executives about their perspectives, and a detailed review of board meeting minutes. From the past year, a pattern emerged that both clarified the situation and confirmed my suspicions. The Clayton investment, while necessary for survival, had created anxiety about loss of family control. My ongoing discussions with Pinnacle, though not yet formal, had been detected and interpreted as willingness to sell the family legacy. Rebecca, with her emphasis on tradition and her literal embodiment of the family's next generation — she had 2 children, I remained unmarried — represented continuity and independence. The board hadn't chosen Rebecca instead of me based on qualifications. They had chosen what they believed she represented: preservation of family ownership over what they feared I represented: potential corporate sale. The irony was that their decision had been made without complete information, specifically, without knowledge of how advantageous the potential Pinnacle acquisition could be. With this understanding, my path became clear. Rather than fighting the decision directly, I would respond strategically by accelerating discussions with Pinnacle while adjusting the structure to address the core concerns that had led to my being passed over. I called Marcus Eastwood the following morning. "I'd like to discuss modifying our potential arrangement," I began. "Specifically, I'm interested in exploring a structure that would maintain the Harrington family's involvement and preserve our brand identity more definitively." Over the next 2 weeks, I worked with Marcus and his team to develop a revised acquisition proposal with several key changes from our initial discussions. Harrington Hotels would remain a distinct division within Pinnacle, retaining its brand, and operational independence too. The Harrington family would maintain 26% ownership in this division, with guaranteed board representation 3. Rebecca would serve as the division's CEO, focusing on brand and guest experience 4. I would become executive vice president of operations for the combined entity, with responsibility for integrating the companies and identifying expansion opportunities. A preservation fund would be established to maintain the historic character of the original Harrington properties. This structure addressed the board's unstated concerns about family legacy while leveraging Pinnacle's capital and market position to accelerate growth. Most importantly, it offered a premium valuation that would be difficult to reject on financial merits alone. 3 weeks after the CEO announcement, I requested a special board meeting. My father, concerned about disruption during the leadership transition, initially resisted, but ultimately agreed when I emphasized the time-sensitive nature of the matter I needed to present. On a rainy Tuesday morning, the board reconvened in the same room where Rebecca's appointment had been announced. She sat at my father's right hand, now with the title to match her position. I had prepared meticulously for this moment, reviewing every detail of the proposal and anticipating potential objections. "Thank you for making time for this meeting," I began, distributing folders containing the executive summary of Pinnacle's offer. "For the past 6 months, I've been engaged in exploratory discussions with Pinnacle Hospitality Group regarding a potential strategic partnership. Yesterday, they formalized an acquisition offer that I believe warrants serious consideration." The room fell silent as board members opened the folders and saw the valuation figure: $415 million, representing a 3.2x multiple on our current market capitalization. My father's face paled slightly as he processed both the number and the implication that these discussions had been ongoing without his knowledge. "This offer represents a significant premium over any reasonable valuation of our company," I continued. "But more importantly, it's structured to address what I believe are the board's primary concerns about any potential acquisition." I outlined the key elements: brand preservation, family involvement, Rebecca's continued leadership of the Harrington division, and my role in the combined entity. As I spoke, I maintained direct eye contact with each board member in turn, watching their expressions shift from shock to calculation to cautious interest. When I finished my presentation, my father cleared his throat. "While the financial terms are substantial, this company was not built to be sold. It was built to be preserved for future generations of our family." I had anticipated this objection. "I understand that perspective, Dad. But preservation isn't just about ownership structure. It's about ensuring the company's continued success in a changing industry. The hospitality landscape is consolidating rapidly. Independent mid-sized chains like ours face increasing challenges competing with global entities for technology investment, distribution channels, and talent." Rebecca spoke next, her voice measured, but with an edge of frustration. "It's interesting that you've developed this elaborate proposal while I'm just beginning as CEO. Some might interpret this as undermining my leadership before it's even started." "On the contrary," I replied, "this structure explicitly maintains your role as CEO of the Harrington division, with greater resources at your disposal than we could provide as an independent company. It acknowledges your leadership while addressing market realities." The discussion continued for nearly 3 hours, with board members raising questions about integration plans, potential synergies, and protections for the family's interests. I had answers ready for each concern, having worked through these details meticulously with Pinnacle's team. Eventually, Walter Simmons, our longest-serving board member and my grandfather's former attorney, spoke up. "I've been involved with this company for over 40 years, and I've never seen a more comprehensive proposal. The premium valuation alone demands serious consideration. We have a fiduciary duty to shareholders that can't be ignored." My father looked troubled. "We'll need time to review this thoroughly. I suggest we establish a special committee to evaluate the offer and report back within 30 days. I nodded. Pinnacle has indicated the offer remains open for 45 days, so that timeline works. However, they've requested an exclusivity period during evaluation, given the premium valuation. As the meeting concluded, board members filed out discussing the proposal in hushed tones. Rebecca remained seated, studying the detailed projections. In the folder, my father waited until we were alone before speaking. "You could have told me you were pursuing this," he said, his voice a mixture of admiration and betrayal. "Would you have listened?" I asked quietly. "Or would you have shut it down immediately based on principle rather than business logic?" He didn't answer directly. "This feels like an end run around the leadership decision we just made." "It's not about who has the CEO title, Dad. It's about securing the best future for the company, our employees, and yes, our family. Sometimes that means recognizing when the industry landscape has shifted fundamentally. The following month was intense. The special committee engaged external advisors to evaluate Pinnacle's offer, while I facilitated due diligence processes. Rebecca, after initial resistance, began meeting with Pinnacle executives to discuss her potential role leading the Harrington division. She approached these conversations with surprising pragmatism, focusing on securing commitments for property, improvements, and brand preservation. 42 days after my presentation, the board reconvened for a final decision. The special committee's recommendation was unanimous. Accept Pinnacle's offer, with minor modifications, to strengthen family involvement in key decisions affecting the Harrington brand. When the final vote was called, my father paused before casting his ballot. "My father built this company from nothing," he said, his voice uncharacteristically emotional. "He taught me that independence was our strength, that answering to shareholders and corporate parents would destroy what made Harrington special." He looked at me, then at Rebecca, before continuing. "But he also taught me to adapt to changing circumstances. The world he built this company for no longer exists. Perhaps the best way to honor his legacy is to ensure it continues, even in a different form." The vote was unanimous in favor of the acquisition. As stipulated in the agreement, Rebecca would indeed become CEO of the Harrington division within Pinnacle, while I would move to corporate headquarters as Executive Vice President of Operations. The transaction closed 60 days later, with Harrington family members receiving a combination of cash and equity that secured their financial future for generations. At the closing dinner, Marcus Eastwood raised his glass. "To the Harrington family, past, present, and future. Your legacy continues, just as we promised." Later that evening, Rebecca found me on the hotel terrace. "I underestimated you," she said simply. "I thought you were just the numbers guy." "And I underestimated you," I admitted. "You've handled this transition with grace and strategic thinking." "Did you orchestrate all this because they chose me over you?" she asked directly. I considered the question carefully. "No, I pursued it because it was the right business decision, regardless of who held the CEO title. The timing was coincidental." She smiled slightly, not entirely convinced. "Well, I'm looking forward to working with you in this new structure. Between your operational expertise and my vision thing, as Dad calls it, maybe we can build something even better than what came before." 6 months into the integration, the wisdom of the decision had become clear. Pinnacle's resources had enabled property renovations that had been deferred during our financial struggles. Their distribution channels had increased our occupancy rates by an average of 12% across all properties. Rebecca was indeed thriving in her role, bringing a fresh perspective to guest experience initiatives that had generated positive coverage in travel publications. My role at Pinnacle Corporate had expanded beyond operations to strategic development, identifying acquisition opportunities that fit the company's collection of distinct brands. The skills I had developed saving Harrington from bankruptcy proved valuable on a larger scale, and Marcus had recently indicated I was being considered for the president position when the current incumbent retired the following year. Looking back, I recognized that my response to being passed over for CEO wasn't about revenge or vindication. It was about finding an alternative path that served both the business and family interests when the traditional succession plan had failed. By reframing the situation from a personal disappointment to a strategic opportunity, I had ultimately created more value for everyone involved. I saved our hotel chain, but they made my sister CEO. So I made a call that left them speechless, not from anger or betrayal, but from the realization that sometimes the path to preserving a legacy requires letting go of how we've always done things. In business as in family, adaptation isn't betrayal of tradition. It's the only way traditions survive at all. The mahogany boardroom table still sits in our corporate headquarters, now displaying both the Harrington and Pinnacle logos. My grandfather's portrait still hangs on the wall, overlooking a business that has evolved beyond what he could have imagined, but continues to reflect the values he established. Sometimes the most meaningful continuity isn't found in ownership structures or management titles, but in the principles that guide our decisions and the relationships that endure beyond them.